Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to review the Utrecht watercolors that are available at Utrecht.com and Dick Blick. Dick Blick owns Utrecht, I believe, and they are an American-made watercolor paint made in Brooklyn, New York. So here on my desk I have some artwork that I've done with these paints, and I'm going to kind of give you my pros and cons and my impression of them. Now I do want to preface this with the fact that I had mentioned in a video that one day I'd like to review the Utrecht paints because some viewers had asked about them, and this lovely viewer, Lora Burgess, offered a sampling to be sent to me. So she made up this little cute, adorable palette and even swatched them out for me. And I've had these actually for a couple of months and hadn't had a chance to use them. So I decided over the last couple of weeks to really dig in and see what they could do. So thank you so much, Laura. I do appreciate it. She also sent me a beautiful postcard that she had painted with the paints. And she has a different style than mine, so I thought you might enjoy seeing that as well. Very delicate, very lovely, and I just want to thank you very much for this. So let's just get right into it. I tend to use watercolors. Sometimes I'll use them all on their own. Other times I'll use them in mixed media. I did find using these, I tended to go more mixed media with them. And yeah, I'm just going to go through it. This is the second time I have tried to do this review because the first time I did it, I forgot to share this one, which is a painting that we did together on the YouTube channel. So if you want to check that out, you can find a real-time version of this right on YouTube for free. And I really enjoyed using them. I did feel like I needed to bring in some mixed media, but I also started off with watercolor pencils. Then I used the Utrecht paints, and then I added some like bleed-proof white and whatnot on there. So a mixed media effect, but I would say probably 60% of this, 50 to 60% was done with the Utrecht watercolors. They performed pretty well. They had enough flow on this paper. This is the Paul Rubens glittery watercolor paper. I liked how my artwork came out. Then I decided to work on this right here, which is actually, there's a time lapse on my YouTube channel for this, and it's available in Critique Club. And I started off with wet and wet watercolor, and one thing I noticed, and I wasn't sure if it was the paper, which is hot press 100% cotton paper from Hahnemühle, the Cezanne line. So I didn't know if it was the hot press watercolor paper or if it was the paints, but I had little to no flow. I wet the background and I put in all the colors, and I didn't have really the colors bleeding into one another at all. I have to tip it up though, because the camera wants to make that black gray. And then I had a very streaky effect with the background using the neutral tint, and I used a lot. I felt like I had to use a lot of paint compared to what I would use in other brands to get the color payoff I wanted, and it was kind of more viscous. So I wasn't really enjoying that, but I had to also temper that with the fact that I'm using hot press paper. I generally like a rougher paper, so you know, I didn't quite trust that that was the paint's issue or the paper's issue. But all in all, I like how the painting turned out, which I guess is the important thing. Do you like how the painting turned out? And I did. So while I was working on this, while it was drying in different stages, I grabbed my sketchbook and I started to work on this little sketch here. And the reference photo for this is from, I think, Dennis Fail Fine Art. He does him and another person does a food painting challenge on Instagram. And I really liked the little tart that they had on there. So I did get more flow here, and I was able to get those kind of bleedy colors. I kind of like my colors to bleed together a bit, especially in the first wash. And I was able to achieve that here on this Paul Rubens paper. And also I did get some flowing with the neutral tint on the other Paul Rubens paper, so probably a sizing issue with the Cezanne, less sizing than, not that the sizing was bad, it's just less sizing and the smoother surface just affected that. And I liked how the paints flowed here, but I also felt like I needed to bring in some mixed media to get, I don't know, just the look that I wanted, where it's sometimes with other paints I don't feel like I need to do that. And then I'm like, well, I really need to test for flow, because that's where I was finding that the paints weren't acting like other paints that I preferred. So with these two examples here, this one I just wet the background, and this is 100% cotton Arteza watercolor cards. I wet the background and I just dripped in all the colors. Because it was already a lovely swatch that was made here for this tin, I didn't really feel like I needed to swatch them out again. And I did notice that some colors moved pretty well, like quinacridones and phthalos moved all right. The cobalt teal moved pretty well too, which is not what I would just generally expect for a granulating sedimentary color, but it had enough had enough movement in it for my liking. I didn't get a lot of reaction with the salt though, which I think maybe just because I had a lot of really finely ground paints. The paints do seem to be really finely ground here, and so they would seep into the paper's fibers before they had a chance to be altered and dried up by the salt. So there was a very mild salt effect in some of the colors. And then I did like one of my just quick rose demos just to see how the paint would bleed. And I didn't have as much flow or bleed as I prefer. So that's a personal preference thing. But if you like that quality in watercolor, that's something that you may not like about these paints. These paints are vegan except for, I believe, ivory black and one other color. They don't use oxgall, so that would explain there not being a lot of flow. Although there are synthetic oxgalls available, Aquazol, well that's a binder, but Core uses Aquazol as a binder instead of gum arabic, and they use synthetic oxgall, which gives it amazing flow. So these would be like the anti-Core. If you do not like Core paints, then go for these, because these are like the opposite of Core. These reminded me a lot of a couple other paints. The way they dried down in pans reminded me of DaVinci, which is another American-made paint company, although I don't feel like I need to use as much DaVinci to get the color payout as I did for the Utrecht. They also reminded me a lot of my Turner watercolors. But I do feel like the Turner watercolors are not as viscous. Like to get the color payout that I need, I don't feel like I have to have as much of the Turner paint. Like I don't have to have it as thick. But I'd say for painting wise, the closest paint would be the Turner watercolors that are made in Japan that you can buy through Jerry's Autorama very reasonably. Now the price of the Utrecht watercolors is really good. I mean, it's I was looking on Blick, and I believe the prices are the same at the Utrecht.com website. I just tend to shop Blick because they have more of what I need to order at any one time, but I believe it's the same company. So, you know, obviously I think they're the same. But the selection at Blick is just a little bit better for what I tend to buy. I have ordered from Utrecht before, never had any problems, but it might have been before Blick bought them, I'm not sure. But anyway, I wouldn't expect it to have any issues either place. So these are between like $10 or $9.58 and $12.83 or somewhere in that ballpark per 14 ml tube. So, you know, that's a good size. That's like your larger watercolor size tubes. And if you want to compare that to Daniel Smith, which would go up to about $30 per 15 ml tube, you know, there's a significant savings there. Now, obviously you need to shop color by color, but like a true cadmium color in Utrecht is like 13 bucks. You know, you can't really beat that. I would highly recommend that cobalt teal color because that's a beautiful color, and for, well, I think it was like $12.83, or it was definitely at least that or under because that's the range of their prices. I thought that was a pretty good buy. The pigment colors here, nothing struck me as problematic. The PG8 for Hooker's Green, you don't see that too often. You'll see that in like Rosa watercolors, White Knight watercolors. I think Paul Rubens might have had PG8 in some of their pan sets. It's not a color you see that often in Western watercolors, but that's what they use for the Hooker's Green. It does have some light fastness issues from what I'm told, but I've used the White Knight's PG8 and I haven't had any issues with that. But then again, I also work a lot in sketchbooks, and a lot of times a lot of my my paintings are in a cupboard until I take them out to, you know, go to an art fair or something to sell them. So I don't think I have any hanging on the wall from that color, so it's hard to say. But you know, PG7, that's pretty standard. PBR7, a lot of single pigments. I found the Quin Red to be very cool leaning. The cadmiums I found to be a little dull. The Cad Red Medium and the Cad Red Free, I both found them to be a little dull. Got a little Pan Pastel on my hand because I did use Pan Pastel over the streaky neutral tint in the background. But you can see those in action on both of the tutorial for the candy cane or the time lapse for the still life on YouTube. Or if you're in Critique Club, you can watch that painted in real time. The still life, but I would say I think they're a decent value. I think that they're well priced. They're economical for an artist grade paint. The Turner paints, which I would almost think are maybe a touch better quality, are quite a bit cheaper. I mean, all the Turner paints that I've purchased, I've paid around, you know, $5 to $7 for a 15 ml tube, and I find the quality to be just a touch better. But that's also probably the fact that I like a little more flow, and the Turners had a little bit more flow than these and were a little bit less viscous, and I think that contributes to a better flow. When your paint has to be a little bit thicker to get the color you want, you're going to cut down on the flow, because whatever is in there for the binders or the fillers is going to going to slow it down a bit. It's going to make it just kind of goopier. But as far as the paintings I did, I like the paintings I did. I didn't like just using it. I didn't like using it as a straight watercolor though. I felt like it really lacked a lot of luminosity in my opinion. But for using it in mixed media, I loved it in mixed media. I loved these pieces I did with the mixed media with these paints. So I think that, you know, they'd be fine for somebody getting started. Maybe doesn't want as much flow. Maybe you like to do big wet and wet backgrounds and you don't want your colors to move. These would be ideal for that. They kind of reminded me a little bit of Holbein watercolors in that respect. Although Holbein, I don't feel like you need as much paint to get the color payout. So I would maybe pick up a tube or two. I would definitely buy that cobalt teal because I mean it's a great deal for that. I like the yellows. The yellows performed really well in the set, but overall the ultramarine didn't granulate as much as I would like. It was definitely more of a finely milled ultramarine, but if you want the ultramarine color but you don't want the granulation, then that would be a good option for you. That's the other thing I liked about the Turner paints is they're very affordable, but they did some really heavily granulating colors if you buy them open stock. And for me, that's something that I like. I like that each color has a little bit of a different personality. Some will flow better, some will flow worse. And that was the case with some of these colors. But for me, I've got other colors that I prefer, but I don't think these are a bad paint. They're just, they didn't knock my socks off, but I think it's more maybe of a preference thing. I just felt like, I feel like you're going to use these up faster because it takes a little more paint to get the color payoff that you might be expecting. Like this neutral tint, like I would never use up this much paint to do a background, but I mean, these were plumply, generously filled quarter pans, and I've got barely any left of the neutral tint. So generally, like I have dots of color like from Daniel Smith in a ceramic palette that I've been trying to use up because it's just so pigmented and so strong. And I'm no big lover of Daniel Smith paint by any stretch of the I like it, it's fine. But I did find like I had to use a lot more to get the same amount of color from the Utrecht. So that could be why they're so economical. Maybe they have some extenders in there that are making the paint more viscous and are reducing the color payout and making the price a little bit cheaper. And maybe they're better used fresh from the tube. So if you're a user of Utrecht paint, if you love Utrecht paint, let us know what you love about it in the comments below. If you don't like it, let us know what you don't like about it in the comments below. But this review is the best, I think the most honest way I can rate these, which would be that I think they're very economical. I think I would pick and choose my colors. Out of this range, probably cobalt teal would be the only one that I would buy. But I also liked the yellows. I thought the yellows were nice. I'm a big fan of a cad yellow anyway, so that cad yellow light, which actually seemed a little bit warm to me, was nice. I actually like the cad free lemon as well. The yellow ochre was good. The yellows were nice. So I would say, yeah, yellows, the cobalt teal, those are nice. I felt like the quin red, I felt like I had to use a lot more quin red than you would expect for that color too. So I don't know if you've used these and you've maybe bought them by the tubes. How long did your tubes last? You feel like you got about the same use out of a tube of this versus Daniel Smith or DaVinci, or these also kind of reminded me of DaVinci. And I think that could be partially, I'm sure that when you're a paint manufacturer, you're going to be sourcing local gum arabic, or you're going to be sourcing certain pigments that are easier and more economical to buy where you are. So that could be why I find them similar to DaVinci paints. But let me know what you think if you've used these paints before. I would say the paints didn't knock my socks off, but I love the paintings that I did with them. So if you're a mixed media artist and you just want some watercolor to use in a mixed media way, I think they would be more than adequate. If you want to stick to traditional watercolors, I don't know if they would be the best choice. But I do thank Lora for sending these to me. It is a little challenging also, and I do want to put a bias out there. Somebody took the time to make this palette for me and send it to me, and that warms my heart, and I don't want to yuck on anyone's yum. So that might give me a little bit better feeling towards these paints than I would have if they were just either sent from a company or I picked them up at a store myself. Just because I don't really have brand loyalty. I've got to say I'm not really loyal to any brand, but when somebody takes the time to do something like this, which is so incredibly kind and sweet, that may color my opinion of these a little bit more optimistically, and I do want to put that bias out there. just so that you're aware of it. You know, I try to be as unbiased as possible, but again, that's a very kind gesture, and I don't want to let that that warm fuzzy feeling cloud my judgment. And if it does, then I want you to know about it. But yeah, I didn't like it just using it as watercolor. Granted, I didn't put as much time into this as I did to these, so so yeah, that's something to consider as well. But I also would I would have gotten an effect that I liked better in less time with different watercolors that had a little more flow. So, and flow, I prefer flow in a paint, and you know, that's personal preference. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's what you like and what you don't like. And if you're somebody that wants to buy a vegan watercolor, and I've mentioned this a million times, my diet's vegan. It has been for 28 years, but when it comes to art supplies, I have paintbrushes that have been given to me, you know, 25 years ago that have natural hair, and I still use them because I feel like it's kinder to the earth to use what I have rather than to throw it away. And with the like gelatin-sized paper, that gelatin is a byproduct of the meat trade. They're either going to throw those bones away or they're going to use them for something. They're not going to not kill the animal for the meat to, you know, to get the bones to size watercolor paper. And the same goes with ox gall and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not judging anybody for the way they live their life. Hope you don't judge me for the way I live my life, but I do not limit myself to only vegan art supplies. It's only my diet that's vegan. So with that is definitely a plus for folks that want to purchase only vegan art supplies. You can do that except for 2 colors. And that's, if you go to Blick's website, I'll link that down below. They tell you what 2 colors it is. And I can't remember what the other one was off the top of my head, but that's really good. And also on the Blick website, you can see any of the colors that you may be interested in picking up. And I would recommend single tubes over getting the sets because they're about the same price in sets. You're not saving a bunch of money by buying a set of colors versus buying just the tubes you want. So do the single tubes. And if you're at Blick, probably Utrecht too. I'm not as familiar with their website, but if you're on Blick, if you click the number, like there'll be like a little picture of the tube of paint and a number underneath it. If you click on that number, it'll take you to the product page for just that tube of paint. And then you can click on pigment info. It's very easy to navigate and it will tell you what pigments are in there. And then I believe it tells you the light fastness, but if you're at all concerned with the light fastness of that pigment, you can look that up on the one of the pigment databases online, such as Handprint or Artist Creation, or Autocano has a pigment database on her site. I believe Kimberly Crick does too. So you can cross-reference that and really check to make sure that you trust that pigment that you're using. But I didn't see any like big red flags, definitely not in these colors. And I'm not sure if this is open stock or if this is a set. I think she said she picked those up at a Blick store, so I'm assuming they're open stock. She did mention, she was so sweet. She sent a folded up, taped up piece of paper and said, "These are my opinions. Don't look at it until you formed your own," because I like to figure out what I think about a product before I see any other reviews of them. And she mentioned that when she was squeezing out the paints, the first batch of paints that she bought had major binder separation issues. And then the last couple she bought were fine. So she thought might have been old stock at the store versus new stock at the store, but she had bought them new and squeezed them out. So binder separation is something that I don't think is a huge problem. Like if you've had paint sitting in your stash for 5 years and you go to use them and you get a big slurp of gum arabic or whatever, stir it up, not a big deal. But I do find it to be an issue if I'm buying brand new paint and I'm just seeing binder separation. That just smacks of maybe a quality control issue. But she said that she thought it might have been an issue where stuff sat on store shelves too long, being in the pandemic. Although I think Blick would turn over supplies pretty quickly. So that's something else I wanted to mention as a potential con. But you know, I think they're a decent paint. I think they're a decent staple. But for me, I prefer a little more flow. And if you're considering these paints, I would highly recommend checking out the comments below this video3 I want to hear from you if you've used these paints before and what your opinion of them are. You know, like I've said, I've done 3 paintings with them, and then I've done a few just like demos just to kind of see how they behave. And I did do a mix of the ultramarine blue and burnt umber just to see what sort of grays I would get. And I love to see a little color separation and granulation in my mixes like that. And I had these out really watery, and it has stayed really uniform, which you may love. You know, if you don't like your colors splitting apart in wet washes like that, then this might be the paint for you. I don't know what you want. I don't know what you like. You need to decide that for yourself. But I like the paintings I did with them when I used mixed media. I did not like just using them wet to wet. Like, I'll just kind of show you here actually. Like, this was the Paul Rubens watercolors, the new ones. I was just playing around doing some roses. I love the blending and the effect that I was getting with those, and because they're light and effervescent and airy, and I thought this was dense and dull and flat feeling. So it's kind of one of those things. It's hard to explain what I mean, and this was cheap. This is cheap paper. This is like it's the Arteza Expert paper, but it performs pretty well. But it's not an expensive paper. This is the Arteza cotton paper. Generally, you get a better effect on the cotton paper, and I was just fooling around because I was just testing out those other paints, and I like that effect better. And it's personal preference as well, but I do feel like there's some extenders or something in that paint that's making it more viscous and keeping you from getting the color payout that you'd expect with artist quality watercolor. But I might be missing something, and if I am, please let me know what you think in the comments below, especially if you've used these, because I don't want to steer anybody wrong. I don't want to give a unnecessarily harsh review, and I don't want to give a unwarranted glowing review either. But those are my thoughts on these paints. These probably aren't going to be the paints that I reach for, but I just love this little tin, and I will definitely use these up, probably like if I go on vacation or something. But yeah, very kind of Laura to send these to me. I do appreciate that, and all the work that she went into putting this palette together. I'll probably pass, except for the cobalt teal. I think that's a good one. I would definitely grab that, save a few bucks, and get a paint that performs really well. But other than that, I don't know if I'd necessarily purchase any more of these. But yeah, that's it. I spent a long time telling you the same thing over and over again. Sorry about that. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed these reviews, if anybody's still here, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.